As time moves forward, time brings changes, and Monster Jam is no exception. Through the decades, we've seen venues come and go. Some stay while others are left behind. But what about the venues that met a worse fate? Here are 10 Monster Jam venues that no longer exist. Roberts Stadium opened in 1956 and held its first USHRA event in 1988. Despite the stadium never being shown on TV, the stadium was popular in the early years of monster trucks. In 2008, plans for a new arena were conceived and was completed 3 years later. The stadium was torn down shortly after the Ford Center opened in the center of Evansville. Fun fact, in 1983, a cannon was fired at an AC/DC concert, and the cannon was so loud the walls of the stadium were cracked to the point where they had to be repaired. The Pittsburgh Civic Center, also known as the Mellon Arena, opened in 1961 and had a myriad of events, and Monster Jam was no exception. However, the stadium was demolished in 2010 and all of its events moved to nearby PPG Paints Arena. The Charlotte Coliseum opened in 1988 and closed just 17 years later. The stadium, however, is famous in monster truck lore as Batman made its debut in this arena at the stadium's last event. It was demolished in 2007. The Kingdome, haha, very funny pun, opened in 1976 and as one of very few venues to accommodate baseball, football, and basketball. Although this venue wasn't known for monster trucks, but rather the various roof issues with the stadium. Not willing to pay for upgrades, the Kingdome was demolished and all events moved to the Tacoma Dome, and the city didn't pay off all the bonds used to repair the dome until 2015. Fun fact, the Kingdome was imploded the day after the first World Finals. Home of the Indianapolis Colts, the RCA Dome, like the Metrodome that we'll discuss later, had an inflatable roof. The venue also saw the debut of the Bel-Air Avenger and Wolverine. The venue was popular in the early 2000s, but was relegated to around the USHRA segments by 2006. The final event was in 2008, and it was meant to air on Speed, but unfortunately it was cut for unknown reasons. However, it was aired in Europe, but the broadcast is currently lost. Following the completion of Lucas Oil Stadium right next door at the end of 2008, the stadium was imploded. Monster Jam moved right into the new stadium and is still very well active. The Georgia Dome in Atlanta opened in 1992, the same year that Monster Jam was inaugurated, and it quickly became a fan-favorite destination. On January 9, 2010, the stadium hosted its first and only live broadcast of a Monster Jam event on Speed, not counting the World Finals 2 and World Finals 3 pay-per-views. However, the stadium quickly became outdated and was quickly replaced with MercedesBenz Dome in 2017. Place of Donkey Kong's debut, Adam Anderson's maiden victory, and my first ever exposure to Monster Jam in 2008. The Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome opened in 1983 and traditionally served as the season opener for Monster Jam. But following a roof collapse in 2010, its fate was sealed. No pun intended. But by 2014, the stadium, named after the 38th Vice President, was no more, as US Bank Stadium was built on top of the Metrodome's ruins. Monster Jam still runs high in the city of flour and sawdust. The Astrodome was one of the most ambitious stadiums when it opened, and of course Monster Jam wanted a piece of the Astrodome pie, and they sure got it, playing some of the most iconic moments in the sport's history, primarily at the peak of Tom Mentz's dominance. Monster Jam last raced in 2002, and the stadium closed following Reliance Stadium's opening right next door. However, unlike other stadiums on this list, the Astrodome is still standing, as it was labeled a historic landmark, so therefore it cannot be destroyed, although the seats have been gutted and is currently served as a storage facility. Home to Super Bowl XVI, as well as many spectacular crashes, the Pontiac Silverdome opened and was Monster Jam's #1 destination in the Midwest. However, by 2006, the stadium was old and worn out, exacerbated by the opening of Ford Field in Detroit, not too far from Pontiac. The stadium was shuttered that year. However, in 2010, the stadium reopened to host a monster truck event of all things, only for it to close once again. The stadium sat dormant for 7 more years before the city of Pontiac ultimately decided to implode the stadium. Twice. To make way for an Amazon warehouse of all things. What was meant to be the home of Marvel Monster Trucks Live in 2012, don't worry, we'll get to that next. Qualcomm Stadium, later named SDCCU Stadium, was arguably the most famous Monster Jam venue on the West Coast. However, with the growing distaste of dual-use stadiums, the stadium was demolished in early 2020. But don't worry, San Diego Monster Jam fans, a new stadium was built next door to it, continuing Qualcomm Stadium's legacy. But now, I pass the question on to you. What is your favorite demolished Monster Jam venue? Leave your comment down below, like and subscribe, and thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you on the flip side.